If there were ever a degree where you thought, surely they're not just going to push you straight to getting an office job immediately after graduating, you'd think it'd be a business degree, right? Nope, I graduated with the highest degree marks in my business school, and yet all the advice was geared towards applying to these graduate roles, basically an entry-level position in an office somewhere. And they were saying, apply now, get in as soon as you can. No mention at all of, starting a business. So today, regardless of whether you're still studying or you've already graduated, let's talk about what options you actually have once you finish university or college. And of course, I'm just some person in a YouTube video. I'm definitely not saying you need to do this. But what I am saying is that there are other options out there which don't really seem to be talked about or recommended. So I'm just gonna throw them out there so that you can decide what's actually best for you. And it doesn't matter what you studied or where you studied, hopefully this will still give you some ideas. Now, my main argument that I want to present to you today is that window after you first graduate is a very unique time, because it's actually the most freedom you've probably ever had or ever will have. Because just think about it for a second. Up until that point, there has always been a clear next step. You've been working your way up the education system. But now, unless you want to stay on and study even more, there is no next logical step. You can basically go and do pretty much anything, which is both exciting and terrifying. And so if you like the sound of a graduate scheme, which is essentially where you're starting at an entry-level position in a company, but there's an accelerated path of how you can work your way up the corporate ladder and get into more senior positions, well, then that can be a great option for sure. But it's just us here, so let's be really honest now. Do you actually want to do that? Or would you just be doing it because you feel like that's what you should do? Because I'm willing to bet that for a lot of our generation, the idea of a standard corporate job, working 9 to 5 in an office setting, working your way up the corporate ladder, getting to more senior positions as the years go by, that doesn't really appeal to a lot of people. I'm not saying that it's bad or that it doesn't work for some people, because for some people it is a better option. But if you're sat there thinking, well, no, that doesn't really appeal to me that much, then why on earth would you be jumping straight into that immediately after graduating? My thinking is that those first 6 to 12 months after graduating, where you have virtually no responsibilities, is perhaps the most opportune time of your life to start working on your real passion project. And maybe that is starting some sort of business, because thanks to the internet, pretty much anyone could do that with very low upfront costs. As for living expenses, well, you've just been living on a student budget, so I'm guessing you're already used to quite a frugal lifestyle. So you could probably manage 6 to 12 months of either moving in with your parents or, splitting somewhere really cheap with a group of friends, anything that allows you to work on the thing that you actually want to do for the rest of your life. And just to be clear here, I'm not saying, oh, just go start a business for the sake of it. What I'm saying is that I honestly think most people deep down have something that they would love to be doing full-time if they could, something that they would love to make a full-time income from, but instead they go and do what they think they should do, which is go and get a full-time job, and then they try and work on their real passion on the side, maybe an hour in the evening, a little bit on the weekends if they can, but because they never really have enough time to dedicate to it, nothing ever really comes of it. And maybe that's they want to be an artist, they want to make YouTube videos, they want to help businesses with their social media, whatever their interests and talents and real passions are. All I'm saying is that in those first 6 to 12 months where there's no real responsibilities, no real pressure, why would you not just give it a go and see if you can make something of it? See if you can start earning some money from what you would love to be doing on a full-time basis. And hey, maybe you do give it a go and it just doesn't really take off in the way you want, and even though you're living really cheaply, you just can't make enough money from it for it to be sustainable. But at least you could say you've given it a fair chance before just rushing in to whatever job you can get. Because in my opinion, there are always going to be jobs, there are always going to be opportunities out there for you to go work for someone else. But opportunities like this, where you can work on your own thing, the thing you really want to do deep down, those opportunities aren't there quite so often. And so I think taking it whilst you can is always going to be quite a wise thing to do in the long run, because the worst feeling is regret. You do not want to look back and say, what could have been if I'd only given it a go. But I know when a lot of people hear that, they'll probably start thinking that, well, if it doesn't work and I then have to go get a job, won't it look bad that I had that blank space on my CV where I wasn't working in a job? Firstly, I would say that I don't think employers care about that quite as much as people think. But more importantly, I want to just tell you the fact that I've recently seen a lot of people I graduated with who got good grades really struggle to get jobs. And I think a big part of the reason there is they didn't really have any real-world experience. So just put yourselves in the shoes of someone who's hiring for a job right now. You've got one person who's fresh out of uni, they've just spent the last few years partying and a little bit of studying. And on the other hand, you've got someone who also graduated, but they've spent a year really working on building their business and learning practical real-world skills, you know, making a website for themselves, and they've got all this research they've been doing about how to get clients, and they've been testing out making products or selling services, whatever it is that you're doing and that you would want to be doing. If it's a choice between those two candidates, I'm going to be leaning more towards the one who's got all that real-world experience. And so this idea that having an empty space on your CV would look terrible, as long as you can justify what you've been doing, then I really don't think it's an issue. I think it can even be an advantage, because just because your business didn't work out, you would have 100% picked up a lot of skills from doing that, which would look really good to an employer. So this idea that it would really hinder your chances of getting a job, I just don't think is true. Now, the next thing I'm guessing some people might be thinking of is, why not get a job first, earn some money, and then go and do your own thing? And if your own thing does require some startup money that you couldn't get in another way, then yes, this may have to be the route you go. But I would just say that a lot of the time you can bootstrap what you want to do. There are inexpensive ways to start a lot of things, especially if you're interested in some kind of online digital business. You often don't need that much money to put in to begin with. And so the reason I recommend doing your own thing first before looking at getting a job is because once you get into a job and once you're on that path of climbing the corporate ladder, working your way up positions, it becomes much more difficult to rationalize the decision to leave that. Whereas if you do it before you even start, it's a much easier decision in my opinion. Because if you think about it, once you start relying on that salary that you're getting consistently from a job, well, it becomes really difficult to decide to give that up, you know? So that's why I think getting started with your own thing before getting into a job and getting on that path might be a good thing, because if you get on that job path, you may never end up leaving. I know several people who said they wanted to do something entrepreneurial, but then they got into a job and they just kind of stayed there, and they never felt there was a good time to leave, and then they've been there for their whole career. That genuinely does happen. And so if you have an opportunity where you could find a way to try your own thing out first, I think that is definitely going to be a good plan. So the simple question behind all of this is, what would happen if you gave yourself a chance at doing the thing that really makes you happy before jumping straight into a job? What would be the worst case scenario if it just didn't work at all and nothing came of it? And then compare that with the best case scenario, the idea that you do get something up and running and that can become your full-time income, the thing that you're really passionate about and want to do with your life. And now, of course, I am very biased with this, because what I just described is essentially what I did myself, and so I know it can work. In fact, for me, I actually got a bit of a head start because I began working on this brand and my business whilst I was still at university. And if you can do that whilst you're at uni or college, that obviously gives you a huge head start, so that when you graduate, you've already got the wheels in motion. And so it gives you a head start, and it means that, you know, you've had that extra time whilst you had money coming in from student loans. But even if you can't do that, hopefully I am an example of how this can work, giving it a go at what you really want to do before just jumping straight into a job. And I don't mean that in a braggy way, like, oh look, it all worked out for me, because I don't know where this will go. It might all crumble and fall apart, and I will end up, well, I say I'll end up in a corporate job. If it didn't, I'd probably just find a different way to try and start my own business, because that's where my heart is at. But my point is that hopefully you can see that this can work if you're willing to give it a go. However, what if you're sat there right now thinking, well, to be honest, I don't really want to start any sort of business or project, or I don't really have a skill that I want to develop or anything like that, but I also don't want to jump straight into a corporate job either. Well, there are a couple of other recommendations that personally I think would be a good use of your time if they're possible. And the first of those is to go traveling for a little bit. Again, take out 6 months if you can on an extremely frugal budget and go somewhere in the world that's pretty cheap to live for a while. So for me, I did Southeast Asia, which is a really cliche backpacking trip, but it was definitely one of the most fun times of my life. But having said that, I genuinely think you do take a lot from those experiences. Aside from being fun, the connections that you make on the way and the kind of experiences that you have really do, it's a super cliche, but broaden your mind and just get you new perspectives on things, which is a genuinely invaluable lesson you can pick up, I think. And speaking of those connections, actually, several of them have gone on to be people that I've stayed in touch with in terms of a useful business connection. A couple of them I've even sold something to. And yeah, there's just been lots of surprising ways that it's expanded my network in a really beneficial way. So I definitely think if you're interested in travel, for the same reasons I talked about earlier, doing it before you get sucked into a job where you're going to have very limited free time is obviously a sensible thing to do if you have the budget for it. Because, as I said, if you're in a job, the chances that you're going to be able to take 3 or 4 months out to go and see random parts of the world is pretty unlikely. You're probably going to be limited to taking a week or 2 here and there, which isn't going to give you a real travel experience of immersing yourself in a completely different culture. So if that does sound appealing, see if that's something you could do. It's surprisingly cheap how you can live in some parts of the world for a few months on such a low budget. And just to be clear with that travel point, I don't mean going on a holiday. I mean having an opportunity to do something wildly out of your comfort zone, really push your confidence levels and just experience a new lifestyle completely and kind of work on yourself, essentially. That's what a part of travel is, you know, finding out more about yourself, improving yourself, all of that kind of stuff I think is a part of it. In fact, I was just remembering that I actually had a really in-depth business strategy conversation with someone in a Korean chicken restaurant. And still to this day, I can remember some of the things we talked about that have come in useful. And the chicken was really good as well. Okay, but what if you don't want to start a business or you can't? You don't want to travel or you can't? And you definitely don't want to go and get a traditional office job and the sort of route that's being pushed by most people. What if you don't want to do any of them? Well, just to give you an extra thing to throw into the mix, something to consider, I've seen a few people really recommend the idea of taking an internship with someone you admire or someone who you follow or someone who has the lifestyle that you want, whether that's kind of the job you want or doing some kind of skill that you really want to develop, whatever it is, someone that you would love to trade places with, essentially. See if you can get an internship working really closely with them, because even if it's at a really low wage, the fact is, even in a graduate job, you wouldn't be earning crazy money to start with anyway. And the experience you would get from working so closely with someone like that is gonna be priceless. And that point is particularly true if you're trying to learn a high income skill. Now, I don't know if you've heard that term before. A lot of people in the business space kind of throw it around, but it basically means some kind of skill that is really transferable to different industries, different jobs, even different businesses that will always command quite a high amount of money. So that is something like speaking. If you can be a confident speaker, then of course, no matter what niche you're in, no matter what you're promoting or talking about, being confident to do that, whether that's on video, whether that's on a stage, is always gonna lead to new opportunities and be a skill that is very in demand and profitable. And there are loads of different high income skills, so by all means, search for them or ask in the comments and we can discuss it more there. But the point is, if you're interested in mastering one of those kind of skills, and rather than trying to learn a specific job, you try and learn a specific skill, then definitely trying to find someone who can kind of mentor you and that you can kind of shadow and follow and learn from. As I said, even at a really, really low wage if it has to be, that is going to be so useful, because that is something you will then be able to apply in whatever direction you then take the rest of your life. So hopefully that has just given you a couple of ideas and reminded you that you should follow your own path and do what feels right to you. The key message is that you have got plenty of time. But that doesn't mean just don't get a job and sit around for 12 months doing nothing and wasting it. It means seize this unique opportunity that you have, the freedom that you have after graduating, to try and build the life that you actually want and what's gonna actually make you happiest. Good luck, you've got this. And if you want to know what business I started whilst I was at university that I'm now working on full time, well, go and check out this video right here, because it's actually a business model that can be adapted to whatever skill sets or interests you have. So it might be something you're interested in doing yourself, especially because it has very little, virtually no upfront costs. So by all means check that out if you're interested and you want to know more, because I explain it in much more detail. But best of luck with whatever you decide. Thanks for watching. Cheers.